Welcome back to Cheddar, everyone. President Trump confirming in a speech that Iran is standing down from its attacks and that there were no American casualties. The president also announced new sanctions against Tehran and did not call for military action. Joining us now to discuss is Lieutenant Colonel Dakota Wood, Senior Research Fellow at the Heritage Foundation. Lieutenant Colonel, thank you for joining us. Your reaction to President Trump's speech earlier today?
Well, I thought it was a good speech. I mean, he was always blunt whenever he talks. So whether it was calling NATO partners and other countries like Japan, to step forward and actually do something rather than just talk about things, or talking about what Iran's done in its history over 40 years of propagating terrorism, not just in the Middle East, but in other parts of the world, very blunt spoken. And I think what he was telegraphing was we had the strategic win here. We took out their top general, the #2 most powerful person in Iran, and all Iran was willing to do was a fairly limited missile strike. I mean, they possess over 2,000 ballistic missiles.
Yeah.
15 of them didn't cause any real damage. So,
well, all they've been able to do within the last week, Lieutenant Colonel, unclear what they'll do moving forward, no?
Well, yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, there's always this uncertainty in these sorts of affairs. You can escalate horizontally. They could empower groups like Hezbollah to prosecute attacks against Israel, as a surrogate kind of thing. So there are many things that could be done that in this conventional exchange of fires, it was rather limited. I think it reflected something that Iran had to do to appease its own domestic audience, to say that they took action in the wake of the killing of Soleimani. But at this point in time, the U.S. can chalk up a win. We'll have to see what happens in the days ahead.
Lieutenant Colonel, President Trump stating this morning that he will be putting punishing economic sanctions on the Iranian regime. Obviously, Iran, no stranger to sanctions, especially with the Trump administration. How do you think these sanctions will be different?
Well, they've really been feeling some economic pain, especially over the last 10 years or so, and certainly with this full court press by the administration. But there have been leaks to that. There have been either European countries who seek to either sell, let's say, engineering equipment. There's been black market sales of oils. The Russians and the Chinese have found workarounds. And so I think what the administration is going to look to do is to kind of plug those holes, to make it a comprehensive network where Iran really doesn't have access to global markets. And so we'll have to see. But you've seen protests in the streets of Tehran and other places in Iran. The people are not happy with this. It certainly affects livelihood and quality of life. But it is, again, it reveals where the priority is. Do you want to spend money on weapons and supporting terror groups, or do you want to invest in your own economy? And they're going to have to make this decision.
Lieutenant Colonel, the president also asked NATO to get more involved in the Middle East process. What does that look like?
It looks like a more intentional approach by countries like the United Kingdom, Germany, France, and others that he named to not just provide diplomatic, rhetorical support to actually put forces in the region, destroyer, for example, or a German submarine, where in the state of their militaries, which have been underfunded for about 30 years, and they're very lacking in the ability to project military power, if they were to deploy something with the goodwill of the nation, we're here to help, that would send a huge diplomatic signal and actually lessen some of the burden on the part of the United States.
What do you think diplomatically the president's strategy should be going forward at this point?
I think to use this historical record for Iran, not just the last week or month, but 40 years of behavior, and to show that over that period of time, even in spite of kind of the pariah status and the economic sanctions, they've invested in missile technologies, support to terror groups, fomenting instability, in that region. And I think he's going to make this case that our actions against them have been very limited, whereas Iran has interfered with the flow of oil traffic out of the Gulf. They've supported rebels in Yemen, which have caused problems, attacks against Israel. I'm repeating myself a bit, but these are evidences of Iranian behavior that has been consistent regardless of U.S. administration or the power structure in Europe. And he's going to make the case that the global community, or at least the Western world, has to make a committed effort to tell Iran that we're not going to tolerate this sort of behavior, that they have to change not only what they're saying, but what they're doing. and see whether that actually changes what the regime in Tehran is willing to prosecute.
Lieutenant Colonel, the United States has been reported in the New York Times and other places had been following Soleimani for years and had opportunities in the past, under past administrations like George W. Bush and President Obama, to actually kill the Iranian general, but ended up choosing ultimately not to do it. Do you think it was a mistake for previous administrations not to do so, and it was the right move for President Trump now?
Yeah, I do. I mean, we see these inconsistencies between rhetoric and reality, right? So everybody likes to keep small problems from getting big. But when you have a small problem, there's always an excuse for not taking action. You know, it's not that bad right now, or we can try something else. But what we have seen across administrations is that Iranian behavior not only doesn't change to the good, when there's not some kind of a reprisal or a counterstrike on that, it actually incentivizes them to continue with this sort of bad behavior. So where Trump has parted with his predecessors is not just rhetorically, but actually taken action. And we can use a non-Iranian example where it's been U.S. policy to shift the U.S. embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem in Israel since 1992. A series of U.S. administrations felt the timing just wasn't right. There was something else that they didn't want to disrupt. And so, you know, action is never taken. And I think that's the break we're seeing the current behind the words and seeing if that actually changes behavior in ways that everybody would like to see, and not just, again, rhetorically or in a diplomatic sense.
Thank you so much for your time here. Lieutenant Colonel Dakota Wood, Senior Research Fellow at Heritage Foundation.